To welcome you then to our latest ISNLive event, Consistency with Compassion, Practical Approaches to Behaviour that Work in Real Classrooms. Today's session is about attention that many of us recognise, how to create consistent behaviour expectations across a school while still trusting teacher autonomy and meeting the needs of diverse learners. This isn't about quick fixes or a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about moving from policy to practice and exploring how consistency, compassion, and inclusion can work together in real classrooms. We're going to kick things off today with our keynote session. And so Emmanuel Awoyelu, sorry, I'm going to get this wrong. Emmanuel Awoyelu, excuse me. Emmanuel, would you mind kind of giving us a proper pronunciation of your name so that I'm not kind of doing this incorrectly? I want to make sure that we get this right.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So my name is Emmanuel Awoyelu. Good
Thank you
attempt,
so
though.
much.
Very good
Thank
attempt.
you. So thank you so much. It's important that we really kind of make that effort and we're kind of paying attention to names as well. So inclusion specialist at GEMS Education, he's going to do our keynote for us today. I'm going to run through the slides for this, so please be patient with us as we kind of move back and forward across these slides. So I will get these up now and we'll get started with our keynotes.
Fantastic. Thank you. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you, first of all, Claire, for the opportunity to be able to speak today. It's lovely to see people from all across the world joining in today. It's 2 p.m. where we are. It's probably very early for some people, I know. But yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Oh, we're very lucky to have you. Thank you for sharing with us. Okay, so I'm going to play then from that first slide. So let me know when you need me to kind of move along.
No problem. Okay, let's get straight into this. So, my love for education is rooted, quite honestly, in my hatred of school as a child. School wasn't a place where I felt seen or understood. Following 2 school exclusions and failed GCSE grades, I had come to the conclusion that school simply wasn't for a child like myself. I internalized the idea that education worked for some children, just not children that looked like me. As the eldest child that was born to Nigerian parents who had immigrated to the UK, this reality made very little sense to them. They couldn't understand how any of this was possible. Now, if you know Nigerians, you know this thing for sure, that education simply isn't something that we take for granted. All my life, my parents had drummed into me the importance of education, success, hard work, discipline, respect. And in the same breath, they would remind me that I wasn't British, but instead I was Nigerian, an African boy. The tension of trying to satisfy both my Britishness and my Nigerian heritage was therefore a challenge. It caused conflict both at home and at school. At times, I felt caught between two worlds, never fully belonging in either. I share this with you today because the pain that I experienced at school is the very reason why I became a teacher and why I'm still one today. I had to turn that pain somehow into purpose. And since then, I've been blessed to teach across multiple settings, special education, mainstream education, the charity sector, and now in the international sector as well. And across all of these contexts, here's a few things that I found. Thank you, Claire. Okay, next slide. Number one, behavior is a form of communication. When children behave in ways that we label as challenging or negative, there is usually something far deeper than the behavior itself. Something unspoken, something unresolved, and sometimes something unmet. This matters because as educators, our role has expanded far beyond the job description that we were given when we first started. We are now expected to have an understanding of trauma, of psychology, of family culture, of neurological differences. And when you consider the limited time that we do have as teachers, the expectations that are placed upon us, and the increasing levels of need within a class of 26 children or more, many of us are left wondering, where is the time going to come from to deal with these situations? Where is the energy going to come from? And yet it somehow remains a non-negotiable. So we must accept first and foremost that behind most behaviors, there is a story that is yet to be told. And children don't always have the language or the trust or the confidence to be able to tell it. Behavior in schools and in classrooms is often shaped by policy. Thank you, Claire. Now, why is policy important? Policy, first and foremost, gives us structure. It gives us rules, systems, expectations. It tells us what is acceptable and what is not. However, culture, next slide. Culture is what influences change. Culture is the lived experience of policy. It's the manifestation of what is written on paper. Culture is how people behave when no one is watching. It's how they interact, it's how they speak to one another, and ultimately it's how they make people feel. The complexity of international schools is that we are often a melting pot of multiple cultures. So the question then is, whose culture takes precedence? For me, the answer is quite simple. The school's culture does. And that happens in two ways. First, through policy. Second, the intention to live out that policy every single day in every single moment. So now what does that require? First and foremost, it begins with a shared vision. A vision that's rooted in the behaviors and the actions that you want to see across your school, from parent to teacher, from teacher to teacher, teacher to student, and student to student. The core purpose of any policy or code of conduct should always be kindness, compassion, and excellence. The golden rule then isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Treat others the way that you would like to be treated. Secondly, after vision, every child needs consistency. Thank you, Claire. We live in a society that today is filled with good laws and poor practice, often the result of weak governance. Schools, in many ways, are a microcosm of that reality. Consistency is the daily decision to do the right thing even when it's difficult, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable. When 2, 3, 4 people walk, talk, and act in the same way, what you begin to see is culture being formed. Consistency then is the expectation that's set in one classroom and is mirrored in another classroom. Consistency is the message that's given to one parent being the same message given to another, irrespective of nationality, background, or influence. Consistency is how staff and students alike are both challenged and supported during critical moments. And then finally, thank you, Claire, community. Community is the foundation of any school. Unlike many corporate organizations, what sets schools apart from other institutions is the sense of belonging that we can create with one another. There's a popular African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. What I've observed is that the more intimate the school setting, the stronger the sense of community and belonging for families and teachers alike. However, that doesn't mean that it can't be achieved in large international schools such as the ones that we work in today. It absolutely can. The most important thing to remember is this: we are all here for the child.
Thank you so much, Manny, for sharing. I'm just going to end this here and make sure that our view is back. Are we back on kind of, sorry, it's hard for me to see now going from tech back to this main view. We can see just me and you guys here now. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for those early reflections and kind of really framing this discussion for us. So now we're going to launch into our panel discussion. But to do this, then we'd like to intro our other key speakers here. So if I could get a quick couple of round of introductions then from Jonathan and from Anneka, that would be great. Anneka, could you start us off, please?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's, as you can see behind us, it's afternoon in Dubai. We're getting ready to end the school day. But yeah, my name is Anneka Bowles and I work at the same school as Manny, fortunately enough. So we work very closely together and share very kind of similar goals and visions for our students. My role in school is actually the primary Senko, and I'm also the assistant associate vice principal here at GIS in the primary school.
Thank you so much. And Jonathan.
Hi, good afternoon. Also coming from Dubai, so it's a Middle Eastern panel this afternoon. My name is Jonathan Cox. I am the principal at Collegiate International School in Dubai, which is an American international school. I've been here for just over 3 years. prior to that in America, Cambodia, and Singapore. So fairly well spread across the world.
Thank you so much for joining us and taking part in this discussion. So to start, we would like to ask everybody in the chat, we're going to launch a poll to ask you which aspect of behaviour management feels most challenging in your school right now. We're going to give you just kind of 60 seconds to have a look at this question. And so there's a few options to select from there. So is it consistency across classrooms for you? Is it supporting diverse and SEND learners, balancing policy with teacher autonomy, staff confidence and workload, or potentially is it something else? And you might want to kind of expand on that in the chat as well. So we'll give you, maybe 40 more seconds to put your thoughts in here. Excellent. Just 10 more seconds. Okay, and I'm going to end that poll now and I'll share these results with you. There we go. So 52% of people said consistency across classrooms. It seems to be a major theme when we're thinking about behaviour and what's happening from classroom to classroom. Supporting diverse and SEND learners is a big part of this also, and balancing teacher autonomy, which kind of leads into that piece about consistency, about teacher decision making and behaviour policy, as well as we know how difficult staff workload can be, but also confidence in delivering effective behaviour management. Thank you everybody for sharing that with us. So we're going to delve into this in more detail then, and we've got our experts on our panel to kind of share with us what they're doing and kind of giving some real examples from working in international schools. Okay, so we're going to jump into this panel discussion. Our first question is for Jonathan. Jonathan, we want to ask, what issues do you typically see arise in your school when it comes to behaviour, and what commonalities do you notice across classrooms or year groups?
I think first I want to say Manny's kind of summed up the big picture excellently, and it's super important to emphasise that culture is behind all of this. And I think the only thing I would have a discussion with Manny about is I think policy comes out of culture rather than the culture reflecting the policy. In terms of the behaviours we see, I think in all the classrooms I've been in 5-6 different countries, low-level disruption is the most common, and in many ways the name is deceptive. Low level suggests it's not a big deal, but it's incredibly wearing on teachers. It's exhausting. If lesson after lesson you can't do what you need to do because there's this chatter going on or there's distractions. Obviously, in recent years, distractions through devices, digital devices, phones, etc. Worldwide debate about, do we embrace phones or ban phones? Do we embrace AI or keep it out of the classroom? There's always those distractions there. And, again, it feeds into that low-level disruption. Less in the classroom, but outside the classroom, and then it impacts in the classroom are what happens on social media. A huge proportion of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis in schools are linked to social media exchanges. It's a massive, massive problem that we wrestle with. The spoken language has become the written language. The impact is greater. Kids write things down that they would never really dream of saying. They think because they've got an avatar, they can't be seen, etc., etc. They get carried away on it. And so much teacher time is now spent trying to diffuse those issues, those conflicts that have grown up out of these social media chats where you don't have a tone of voice. And so what you say is interpreted by the recipient rather than you being able to have any great influence on that. So an awful lot of it comes down to, I think they might have been joking. it may have been a bad joke, but I think they might have been joking, but it escalates beyond that. Those, I would say, are the three key areas that we wrestle with continuously. Kids having a punch up on the football field still happens. It happened in my day. It'll always happen, but that's not often, and it's something we deal with as it comes up. It's almost a sort of normal part of school, but the kids are exposed to constant chatter online. Teachers are exposed to constant chatter as a result of that, and trying to get that focus within classes can be really tough.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And it's clearly a big piece of what lots of international teachers and teachers worldwide are managing in terms of social media use and phone use, and what's happening not just now in the classroom, but also happening at home, and how that can build and come back into the classroom, creating, potentially more behavioral problems or that low level disruption. It can just be as well, phones in pockets or in bags going off. Constantly these different things that teachers are trying to manage. So it's a good kind of element to raise as well, because it's definitely something, a real challenge kind of in classrooms today. So with that said, thinking about impact and what we can do, Manny, where do you see inconsistency having the greatest impact on students? Is it on staff confidence, or is it on school culture? Oh, Manny, sorry, you're currently on mute.
So sorry, rookie mistake. I think it's a mixture of things. If I start off in the classroom, inconsistencies have a massive impact on the confidence that the children have towards the adults. A small example is if your message and your expectations change from day to day, I think that in itself causes a lot of anxiety, but also disruption in terms of routines in the classroom. And I've seen that actually a lack of routine or inconsistency in routines, or the message or the expectations, or even sometimes the consequences or the repercussions, these things, it does cause turmoil in the classroom because children don't know if they can trust what's being said. I think when you look at the wider context, one classroom having a shared set of expectations and rules compared to other classrooms who are maybe not witnessing the same thing or the same messages being shared. Now you start to see in corridors and in playgrounds differences in behavior, differences in the way that staff are approaching things. So I think generally speaking, consistency is so important, because inconsistency in every aspect of school or even home life causes a lot of disruption, a lot of turmoil. And children do like routine. As much as they go against it, they do like routine, and eventually they do follow sets of structures. So to summarize, I would say inconsistency impacts the classroom, but also impacts the wider school culture. And that's the same for staff members as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's an incredibly difficult piece, this idea of consistency, because if you have a classroom where you have a teacher who says, well, this student has, they haven't been contributing well, and actually they just did a little bit today, so maybe I'm going to let this behavior slide because they have seemed to made a step today. These are some of the real kind of issues in terms of consistency. Do you have any advice for that situation where you might have a child who's come in who normally is low level disrupting, or maybe quite loudly disrupting, but today they managed to do some work, but there are still behavior problems going on? Do you allow that to slide, or do you try to hold that consistent approach for all students at all times?
So yeah, so I guess the reason why consistency for me is challenging for teachers is because you have a set of children in the classroom who you may need to approach differently. I always say that your expectations should always be high for every child. The work that you want them to produce, their behavior, everything that you expect from them should always be high. But then we understand that children with maybe complex needs, physical needs, learning needs, they need a different approach. It needs to be given to them differently. So to answer your question, if a child has produced a little bit of work on one day but has done more the next day, for instance, I'm always going to have an expectation that if they've given me a benchmark of you could do this level of work, then for me, that is your baseline. And I'm always going to have a high expectation for them. Whether they can do that or not is a different matter, and how I approach them around that is different. But my expectation is always high. That's what I'm consistent with. And that's why I always tell the teachers, if their writing's messy today, fair enough. Maybe you need to let it slide, but it doesn't mean that you then go down tomorrow. It's the same expectation, because when they realize that that's what you want from them, they will come up to that level where possible. And if they can't, your job is to help them to get there without obviously being, without it being in a malicious way. So I think consistency in your expectations shouldn't change at all.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, a really good point about having that consistent kind of approach to their standards as well, and having those high expectations for them. Our next question is for Jonathan. Which elements of your current behaviour policy work well in supporting teachers, and which areas potentially can create tension or confusion?
We're going to get quite a lot of reference back to the same words. Consistency is key. And the answer to which succeed and which cause tension can be the same, because it's the application of those. I think, although it's not part of the policy, the culture of our school is really what we've changed over the last 3 years or so. Our behavior policy hasn't actually changed that much, but the culture that underpins it, that is present in the school, allows the students a better understanding of why it's there, what the aims are. It's framed by respect. It's framed by try to reach the highest standard you can every day. Every day is a new day. Do your best every day. We have very traditional, typical aspects like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. They're signposted. It's all very clearly described. That works really well, where a teacher says, look, this is a level 2 because these are the behaviors. This is what we're seeing. This is why it's a level 2. This is what's going to happen as a result. And what's going to happen is not just, you're going to redo that work. There's going to be some sort of sanction, but there's also the restorative practice. And I think that has to be an absolute cornerstone. Manny referred to the fact that behind these behaviors, there's always a reason. It may not be a very good reason, but to that kid at that time, it is a perfectly good reason. So it's about finding that out. It's about having the conversations, de-escalating the situation. It's an old truism: an escalated adult can't de-escalate an escalated teenager. So making sure that we always stay calm. And I think, I sit here as a school principal. The role of school leadership is essential in this. Part of teachers being confident to apply policies consistently is knowing that they have the support of their leadership team. Knowing that it's never seen as a failure if a teacher comes to us and says, I need help with this student isn't responding to, I'm not coping with this aspect or that aspect. That's what we're here for. Some teachers don't do that. Some teachers don't need to do that. But where things go badly wrong is where a teacher does need support and doesn't feel confident that their leadership will give it to them, that trust isn't there. Again, it comes down to school culture. Teachers should be comfortable and happy to come to any one of us at any time and say, I need a hand. And our response should be, no problem. What do you need? If all of that is in place, then you deal with the general day-to-day issues that you always deal with in an organisation that's got over 1,000 people in it. There's always going to be something happening, and some of it's always going to be not what you want to be happening. That's human nature. And again, it's dealing with the fact that, it's human nature. These are kids. This is what happens. It's not personal. It's not something to get upset about. It's something that we talk to them about and deal with as something that we get on with a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, excellent points. Really important that you're right. Staff feel comfortable that if they are having issue, it might be with one class or something is recurrently kind of coming up for them, that they can go then to their senior leadership team and they have that culture of trust, and it's not going to feel like a failure or feel like something that you're not doing as well as your colleagues. It's all about kind of trying to work together and build that culture together. Thank you. Our next question then is for Anneka. Where do behaviour policies unintentionally disadvantage students with SEND, even when inclusion is an explicit goal?
Yeah, thank you. And that relates, Manny and I were just talking, we've had a few instances this morning where this is a perfect example of that. So policies obviously are written in a very black and white way. They need to be black and white to make sure that everybody knows what's happening for the vast majority of students. And just as Jonathan was saying, there's a protocol, there's a procedure in place for everybody that is fair and consistent. What we have as well as in our school, we have quite a number of students with quite complex physical behaviours, and actually their physical behaviour is part of their need. So it's distinguishing between that, making sure they follow the policy, making sure we follow the guidance for those students, and we're also making sure we're explicitly teaching towards those goals that we've set for the children that we're working with. What we have for some of our students that do engage in physical behaviours throughout the day is they have an additional risk assessment in place, where that additional risk assessment is really important. It outlines if those physical behaviours or potentially verbal behaviours take place, what are we going to do about it? What happens next? So there is kind of a caveat for students that where that behaviour is part of their additional need, there is support in place and an additional pathway that we can follow. For some of those students, it might be that they're reflecting with myself or, like I said, Mr. Manny or one of the other teachers within school, or it might be that it's an internal exclusion or external exclusion, or again, we're seeking additional advice from external specialists that we have available to us. But yeah, it can easily be very black and white, and you can think this child's done this, they need to go home straight away. But actually, we need to find out more about what's happened. Just as Manny talks about straight away, all behaviour is a form of communication. So there's obviously a reason that's happened. Some of our students have physical behaviours when they're sad, and some of our students have physical behaviours when they're happy. Neither of those things makes it right that they've hurt an adult or potentially another child in school, but we need to try and get to the bottom of why those things are happening and learn and adapt our practice within school for that. I think what I try and do, and lots of schools I've worked at, we've been trauma-informed schools. So it's all going to know kind of those big question marks. Why? What's happened? What's leading up to that? Is there other additional things that we don't know about? There's always that big question mark, that unknown, when you get a child that comes to school. We've got no idea what those other 12 hours before that has happened. So always kind of being, very open-minded and reflective, okay, potentially why those things are happening, not making rash decisions. The incident that Manny and I were investigating today, I was with the child. Manny went and did all the investigating to make sure we had the full picture before we can make a final decision about what happens next. So I think those things are really important because, as Jonathan said, when adults are high, it makes it really difficult to make important decisions and really important to make sure children are calm and regulated in school.
Thank you so much for sharing and for those reflections. There was a lot in there that was really kind of answered to that and in a really well-rounded way. I think, the idea about risk assessment and having that as the kind of cornerstone to this and really understanding that child is so essential. And so then, like you said, you can really understand the child and their in-depth needs, but also then having those high expectations, doing that kind of additional work around it if there is an incident, and then coming back together. Thank you so much. Our next question is for you also. So to build on this, how do staff differentiate between behaviour that is a communication of need and behaviour that requires a behavioural response, particularly for students with SEND?
Yeah, again, repeating some of the things that I've said already. What we've done in our school is we've done additional PD and training to make sure that staff are aware about types of behaviours, because all behaviour requires a response. Whether we categorise it as a behavioural response or a communication response, it depends on the child that you're working with. So we did some PD in term one with staff around different types of behaviours. So you've got anxiety behaviours, you've got defensive behaviours, you've got risk-taking behaviours, and then you've got something called tension reduction. And what we try to work with staff is what those behaviours look like. They can all look the same for all the categories, but again, it's really important, and it's founded upon you knowing your children really well. So an anxiety behaviour for one child might be throwing a book across the room, but equally that could be a defensive behaviour for a different child. So it's making sure that you understand your children really well, and then of course you can categorise those behaviours. What we have in our school is something called logical consequences. So we follow the PBIS model within school to make sure we're positively supporting students. And again, that looks different for every child because every child is different. It can't be, whilst the policy might be black and white, the way we respond and speak to children isn't necessarily as black and white with that. We're conscious, and we're always kind of trying to seek about building relationships with children, making sure that they're comfortable. But yeah, number one, making sure we know them really well so that there is a consequence in place. The other students can see there's a consequence in place, but that will look different for every child depending on their need or whether it is just more of a behaviour.
Yeah, thank you. And that's so important, isn't it? That idea of justice for students, that they can see that other people are having the same kind of, if it's not exactly the same response in terms of behavior, but there is some kind of consequence based on behavior.
Yeah.
That helps.
Just add to that, Claire, I think I'm with the students that I work with, I'm quite explicit to the other students that are maybe looking on as to why we did the things that we did, because they've always got questions. There's always justice to be sought, especially if they don't see the consequence. If a child comes with me or a child comes with Manny and we go somewhere, they don't necessarily see what consequence has been put in place. We're very clear about making sure that everybody can see that a consequence did happen. We talk about how consequences are different. Everybody has different needs. It's kind of that inclusive approach, in the same way that some children might need support for math, reading, writing. Some children need support with communication, with spelling. They need support with behaviour. So it's trying to normalise that looks different for everybody.
Absolutely. And ultimately, it looks different, but it's creating that consistent approach that there still is a consequence, but it just looks different for each child. Yeah, thank you so much. Our next question is for Manny. How does your school currently approach behaviour for students with SEND, and where are adaptations most needed?
So Annika has actually
Yeah.
alluded to some of these comments already, but it's still relevant to, I guess, to be specific. So I think for us, first and foremost, we have an overarching behavior policy and expectations that the staff are aware of, and then individual classes will have their class agreements, and they will discuss and meet every day. We have a protected time called SEL time, so social emotional learning time, where they can discuss and incidents that happen, they can discuss how to approach these things, etc., etc. But when it comes to specifically children with SEND, we have what we call an IEP, an individual education plan. And for some children, as Annika has already mentioned, that the behaviors that they show are the very needs that we're supporting them with. And so the staff members, first and foremost, are made aware through the documentation, but also through meetings. We might have team around the child meetings, we might have grade meetings where specific children with specific needs are being spoken about, and we're planning around them. We have quite a wide team. Of course, we have English language department, we have specialists. So it's really important, especially for key children, that we gather everybody together to get a shared idea as to how this child might portray in the classrooms in different places. Because, for instance, a child that has very complex needs may be fantastic in their PE lesson, but when it comes to the homeroom class, this is where we see challenges. And so actually we're able to say, okay, so why don't we plant a bit more of the PE sessions in there and work with his strengths and try and mitigate some of these issues if it's because of something that's happening in the classroom and so forth. So we treat things on an individual basis, but we have documentation that formalizes what we're doing as a school, and that's the individual education plan. And I think having the balance of what is, as Annika said, black and white on paper, that's one thing. But what you've written down on paper in term one, that child goes home for the Christmas break, they come back and there's something that's happened. And actually the new behaviors that we're seeing, we need to revise actually the plan and the profile of this child. And we need to now discuss, well, this child's a bit different this term, what's happened. And I think the final piece that we haven't spoken about yet, but I'm sure it will come to, is the collaboration with parents. I always say to the teachers in particular, it's very important that you communicate with parents as much as possible, and not just when the child is doing something wrong. Communication with the parents when things are going great, when you've noticed things, it makes the parent, I'm a parent also, it makes you feel like you've been seen, that you're valued, and that they're actually paying attention to your child. When you get a message saying, I just noticed your child wasn't eating today. It's not quite right. Or I noticed that in the classroom they were sleeping quite a lot. Is there something that's happened over the weekend? That line of communication is just the beginning of a really strong relationship. And I've always found, I've worked in special education for about 5 years, and the really most complex children, when you have that relationship with the parents, the level of progress you can see in the behavior, in the progress of children, a lot of it, I would say, comes down to the collaborative work between everyone in the school, but most importantly with the parents involved as well. So touching on what we've said before, I think that's what we would do, but definitely a collaborative approach to supporting children is also very key.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a good point to make. And having that buy-in with parents and having that relationship with parents is so powerful. And as you said as well, it's also nice to kind of make those calls that are not just about behavior, but maybe just touching in on, I noticed this, or even then to praise as well, and kind of continue to build that relationship with parents is essential, and kind of building those high expectations and making a child feel that sense of worth. Thank you for sharing. Our next question then is for Jonathan. How do you balance clear, consistent expectations with teacher autonomy and professional judgment in daily practice?
It's a great question. We talk very long in this profession about teachers being professional, and then there's a tendency to treat them like children. We over monitor, we over scrutinize. For me, if you employ someone as a professional, they're able to do their job. And part of that is respecting that they are doing their job and not over managing, not over monitoring, giving them the space, acknowledging that we're all different. So it comes down to the culture of the school. Are the teachers respected as professionals, not just called professionals? The point that Manny made about parents, the relationship between student, parent, and school has changed hugely over the years. If I went home and told my mum I got a detention, she would also punish me. Nowadays, kids go home and say, I've got a detention, and the first thing the parents do will ring up and complain to the school that their kid's been given a detention. So we don't necessarily have that relationship in place. And it's really important, again, that teachers feel that leadership will support them when parents complain and say, no, I'm sorry, this teacher has acted completely in line with our policy. Happy for you to come in and discuss it, but the teachers acted completely correctly. Teachers knowing that they get that respect then empowers them to act more confidently. If they're acting more confidently, they're also then able to broaden their practice and be more understanding and restorative and not just rely on the behaviour policy. It's important that leadership are visible in supporting teachers, that we're not just sitting in our office, but that we are out there around the school, visibly supporting teachers, having conversations with students, making it clear. I mentioned before the idea that a teacher should feel comfortable coming to any member of leadership, middle leadership, senior leadership, whether it's head of department, head of grade, or head of school. And that member of leadership should be positive in their support. It should never be sure, no problem. Let's go. Tell me about it en route. No problem. I've got your back. That's what creates a system where teachers feel comfortable. We know teachers deal with things in different ways. The level system, for example, lots of flaws, works in some cases, not in all, but there's a consistency to it. The lack of consistency is that one teacher gives out 20 L1s a lesson, another teacher gives none. That's not always a problem. That may well be because the teacher that gives out none doesn't need to. They don't need that weapon in their armory of behavior management, that tool to manage their behavior, whereas the other teacher does need that tool to manage the behavior. So it's really knowing and understanding your staff, supporting them. And I find, very often following up with a conversation with the member of staff, underlining, not a problem, we're always here to support, but then saying, next time, maybe think about taking this approach. Have a conversation with that kid. Get to know them better. Find something in them that you like, something that you celebrate. There's a connection there. Build that respect, because it's all about relationships. It's a totally relational profession that we're in. If kids feel that you like and respect them, if they feel that the school culture is supportive and kind and positive, they're way less inclined to do something that is disruptive to that. They're much less inclined to be disrespectful to a teacher who's shown them respect, who's behaved decently towards them. So there's all those sorts of aspects. But, we work with dozens and dozens of different people. They're all at different stages of the life and career. So it's not only not a one size fits all for students. It's not a one size fits all for teachers either. And it's important to know them, to understand them, where they're coming from, the support they need, or do they just need you to leave them alone to get on with it?
Yeah, thank you. And that's a really good point to make, because you often find that students will naturally gravitate to certain teachers, and they kind of find their people. You might find that students might really kind of gravitate to their PE teachers, and there might be a lot of kind of disclosures and safeguarding disclosures that can happen to PE teachers because they're able to build these types of relationships. It might be that some teachers some students are really drawn to their English teachers. Whatever it is, you do find that there is different approaches based on that member of staff, and so understanding that all the staff are different as well, but trying to kind of have this consistent approach in terms of supporting staff in their journey, and having this kind of behaviour policy that underpins all of this is really key. Another big part of this that we're really trying to unpick here as well, of course, is how difficult this can be when you do have diverse learners and learners with SEND need. And Anneka, our next question again is for you, and I think this is one that's coming up in the chat quite a lot, is what support or training do teachers need to feel confident in adapting their behaviour approaches for SEND learners, whilst then trying to remain aligned with whole school expectations?
Yeah, and I think going back to kind of something I said in one of the first questions, making sure, like I said, you're delivering kind of accurate and purposeful PD. So the PD that we did last term, it was very kind of hands-on. There were lots of different activities. It was, I thought, very engaging, Mr. Manny, but you can disagree if you like. But it was very hands-on. We had everybody together, and we were talking about real kind of school scenarios that we have. PD, where you're just talking to someone, isn't effective. I switch off within probably 5 minutes anyway. So making sure that PD is active and purposeful, talking about the children that we're actually working with. Again, here in the UAE, we have something called inclusion support teachers, and with KHDA directives that we have in school, we run a co-teaching model. So our inclusion support teachers go and co-teach with teachers within their homerooms to show them what it looks like in real life. And that's how they're supporting the teachers all of the time. Yes, it's for teaching and learning, but it's also for behaviour. It might be SEMH needs, or it might be kind of physical needs. So they're doing that in partnership with the teachers and co-planning with them all of the time. On top of that, me personally, so some of our staff will have, and I think that there's one of the things in the chat, they don't feel comfortable in kind of having those conversations with parents because they're difficult conversations. We're not all comfortable in having difficult conversations, and that would be the same for me when I first started out. It's all about practice, and it's all about doing it with someone and learning with somebody as well. So even yesterday when we had an incident, the teacher wasn't confident in making the phone call. So as a leader, I'm like, right, let's do it together. We're only going to learn from doing it together. I'll do a bit, you do a bit. We scripted it before, and then we had the telephone conversation. The next time, I imagine, I'll just need to be in the room for her, and she can do it by herself. And just as Jonathan said, having that little conversation afterwards, well, maybe don't quite say that, tweak it for this next time. And then the same we do with our children. It's all about that gradual release of responsibility. We want to upskill those teachers to be able to do it independently, but also they know that, just as Jonathan said again, we've got their back. So if a parent does come in and make a complaint, if there is something that maybe has gone awry, they need to have the confidence in us that we're going to support them. But then on the flip side, again, Jonathan briefly mentioned it at the end, holding them to account. So if they have made a mistake, they need to kind of own the mistake. We need to make sure that we're learning from those mistakes, and the teachers know that isn't aligned with school policy. That's not kind of in the best interest of the child. We need to do something different. So like I said, there's a multitude of things, but it's making sure you're doing it with the children. There's a lot of things about regulation, and teachers and parents will often refer to self-regulation. The children need to self-regulate. Yes, but there's a million steps before we get to self-regulation. And I think personally, what I believe is we need to do more training on what I call co-regulation. You need to have adults in the room that can co-regulate with children, where they're emotionally sound and they're able to kind of work with that student, showing them what regulation looks like, modeling with them what that looks like within the classroom, talking them through the steps, and them actively practicing it. Regulation isn't just something that happens. Children have to actively be taught it, and you would do it with a baby, wouldn't you? And it's the same thing. Our children have what we call holes in development. And just because you've got an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 20-year-old standing in front of you doesn't mean that their trauma response is going to be age appropriate. When they go in there to their trauma response, they're going to go back to whatever developmental brain they have. And it's important that as adults, we know what that looks like, and we've got strategies within ourselves to be able to support that. So that's what we do within our inclusion team. We do that alongside the teachers, but also do that alongside the children. It's very time consuming, but obviously the challenges of that, can we get to 52 classes if something's happening in every class? So there is the flip side. So we want to obviously upskill those teachers to be able to do it by themselves. And again, Jonathan said that it might be that we don't need to go into 20 of those classrooms. Brilliant. The teachers already got that toolkit. They've already got like those skills in their bag. We can concentrate on the teachers that really do need that help.
Yeah, thank you. What an incredible collaborative effort that's happening in your school to support those teachers. It sounds like you're doing some fantastic work, and we'd love to know a little bit more about that PD if you're happy to share in the chat or with me afterwards, and we'll make sure we send that out to people because I think there's quite a lot of interest in that here. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know that you need to shoot soon, so if you do need to, then please do, and we'll carry on.
I've got about 5 more minutes, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Right, our next question then is for Manny. We wanted to ask, how are reasonable adjustments for behaviour communicated and normalised across staff so students with SEND experience consistency rather than mixed messages?
Yeah, good question. I was thinking about this, pondering about this, reasonable adjustments for behaviour communicated and normalised across staff. So again, I think that there's many ways in being able to communicate these changes. I think the first thing is, and I've always said that some of the best conversations happen in the corridors with staff members and teachers. Like when I'm walking through, let's say grade 4, it's the conversations I have with the teachers in the corridor. Sometimes it's just a minute, sometimes it's 2 minutes, but they can be very informative. And that's where you can share information. But then more structurally, we have, for instance, in our school, we have grade meetings. And in these grade meetings, we meet as a team, and it's a time to plan, but it's also a time to discuss if there's any updates from the inclusion department, things that may be related to a specific child or a cohort of children, or maybe just a grade-wide conversation. This is a time. So I think the key thing is having time. And I think one thing that we're pretty good at in our school is there is time to meet as a team, to collaborate, to speak, and to discuss. Another good form of practice, something that we can always do better, is we have paperwork. And I understand, obviously, being a teacher at one point, that if you've got individual education plans for multiple children in your classroom, let's be honest, just like the policy, not everybody has the time or the capacity to read and digest these policies. So I do think it's quite good that we have a department where we understand those individual education plans because we've written them alongside the parents and the children and the staff members. So it's, for us, that's almost like the Bible for each and every one of these children. When something's important, we refer back to that, but we also may need to send that. We may need to have it printed. We may need to, staff members may, get into a bit of a frenzy and they're panicking, and we have to remind them. We know what the policy is, but remember, this child has an individual education plan with targets, short-term, long-term. Why don't we go back and revise that? And then they often find that, oh, actually, yeah, you're right. We did say we'd give them extra time or an extra space, or we would disseminate it in a different way. So there's many channels in communicating. I think more than anything, communication in itself is incredibly important. And I think things do fall apart when staff feel like they're not being heard or when they're not being listened to. But more importantly, when they feel like they're not being spoken to and communicated about small changes, big changes, that does also, that lack of consistency, I think, also causes a lot of tension with staff members. So all forms of communication are important, but communicating as regularly as possible is the most important aspect in that.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really key point to make, that tension that can happen for educators who might be teaching across a subject where they're teaching lots of classes, or it might be the start of the year and they don't know the students as well. And there's lots of those kind of individual plans that they need to catch up on and try to really understand those students. And that can be a lot to take on in terms of workload. And so I think it's really important to kind of raise that and understand and work with teachers on that. Thank you so much. Okay, and then our next question, we have a question actually that is for all. So I'm kind of going to throw this out to you, and then there's been lots of questions as well in the chat that we'd love to kind of get to if we've got some time. But I wanted to ask, what does success look like when behaviour policy, classroom practice, and inclusive support for SEND learners are truly aligned across a school? No pressure for who wants to kind of jump in and pick this up first.
I'll jump in. I think the first point I would make is that the behaviour policy is referred to less and less frequently. When policies are there in the background and they become more of a compliance document than a daily guide, you know you're getting it right. Either that or your policy needs revising. And what does the school look like? It looks like and feels like a happy, safe, secure place where students are learning, students are engaged, where teachers and students are mainly happy to come into school on a daily basis, and they go home happy on a daily basis as well. It all beds down into culture, and the policies are there to support that culture as you're forming it. And then as your culture becomes embedded, as it becomes lived throughout the school and throughout the school day, as I say, those policies become frameworks that you require less and less.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to let Anneka go because she might need to go soon.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. And I think success isn't necessarily behavior incidents not always happening, because as you said, when we've got schools, when we have such diverse communities, when we have such diverse children in our schools, and I think, like I said, making sure that the things that we've said, the plans we put in place are followed through. So if it's a risk assessment for a child, that's followed through. So people can see action, people can see consequence for the plan for that individual. Again, consistency isn't about everybody necessarily having the same. It's having to make sure that there's a follow through, making sure there's an action, making sure there's a next step for everybody, but also making sure that that next step is transparent. So you'll often hear, oh, this student's got away with such and such. And I think someone's put that on the chat as well. Like, how do you explain that to a parent? Open honesty and transparency. I feel like we're very good at that within this school. And that's why we have co-conversations with teachers, with parents, because that's where sometimes the teachers find it difficult, because what you can't say, oh, it was an SD student that did that. They did it because of this, because what you're doing there is you're giving them an excuse. In our school, we really try and get away from SD students require sympathy, or trauma-informed students require sympathy. That's not what they need. They need empathy, and they need understanding, and they need compassion, but they also need the guidelines and the boundaries to go with it. So success looks like everybody following policy, yes, Jonathan, but also what we've agreed that we're going to do as a team to move the school forward, not necessarily nothing happening.
Yeah, thank you so much for your reflections, and really important as well, because like you said, behavior incidents will happen, things will happen. And so, yeah, knowing that that this is part of what it is kind of being in a school.
Okay, I do have to go now. I've got
thank you so much for your time. Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Manny, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to this point as well?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much of what's been said already, because I think the answer for most people is we want children to be happy in schools. We want staff members to be happy. What that looks like is going to differ for lots of people, but I think we should also remember that we are educators, and the goal of a school, or us as educators, is also for young people to be educated. And I've said this, it doesn't matter what the setting is, doesn't matter what the provision is. For me, one of the key factors for great outcomes is high quality teaching. And actually, I found that sometimes a lot of the behavior that we see in the classroom is as a result of teaching practices that aren't quite refined or where they should be. And so you can actually alleviate some of these behavior incidents. We're not talking about children with complex needs, we're just talking about persistent low-level behavior. A lot of the time that comes down to the level of teaching, the quality of the teaching in the lessons. And that quality of teaching, sometimes it may encompass routine, structure, creativity, play, movement breaks. So for me, I think about a great school that's embedded policy and it has a great culture. I feel like if I walked into a school, the front of desk are happy people and are welcoming. There's a sense of belonging in the school. The way staff members interact with one another, there's a level of respect. The way teachers speak to students and vice versa, there's a level of respect. I'll go one step further in saying there is a culture in some international settings where parents can speak to staff members however they want to. But a school that understands that this is a human being and a professional, and so although you care a lot, in this school, we don't interact like that. Let's do this in an amicable way. I'm like, fantastic. Because if you only based it on grades, Many schools are selective. You can have great grades, but you're not very inclusive. So I do think there's too many things to encompass what makes a very good, successful school. But I do think a sense of belonging for all children, great quality teaching automatically produces progress. And I think just that shared sense of identity as a school, I think really is key for all staff members and students and families.
Yeah, thank you so much. What a fantastic point to make. We have got just a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to kind of throw one last question in before we finish. And this was about kind of then effective restorative justice. So what does that look like in your school?
Manny, do you want to go first on this?
You are muted first, so you get the first.
All right. Look, it looks different in every case. I think the key thing is you have to have that student as part of the conversation. You have to find a way to get that student to join the conversation, to open up, to start to have that exchange. And that can take a long time in some cases, and it can take a lot of meetings. So you need to be persistent. You can never just shrug and say, oh, we're done, because then you'll see those repeat behaviors. And I think in some of the comments I've seen popping up about, the time, one of the questions earlier, the time management aspect of it, the upfront investment in time, the forming relationships, as Manny was referring to. Make sure you've got your seating plans and lesson plans in place. Make sure that your lessons are engaging, that you're not walking in and winging it if you're not able to wing it really well. Some teachers can, fantastic. You don't need to plan. But if you know your classes go downhill, if you haven't planned, make sure that planning's in place. Restorative practice is about understanding that kid, trying to get to the issues that are at the base of that behavior, and then dealing with those issues. It's about that kid understanding what they've done, the impact of what they've done on other people. It's about developing their empathy, their sympathy, all those human emotions. And it's a totally human practice of sitting down, conversing, sharing feelings, sharing views, and then trying to bring it to a point where you say, well, would you do that again if you had the choice? And the answer is, and I'm thinking, no, of course I wouldn't do that again, because now I understand the impact that had, or you've helped me understand what other choices I can make.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really key, demonstrating that you are also a human, and that, let's kind of have this conversation, unpack the situation, and would you make that choice again, kind of knowing what we've known now and kind of reflecting on it, really key. Manny, did you have anything else to add here?
It's only because we've had this incident today. I think it's really important that when you are in the process of trying to implement restorative justice, that when you have situations where a child has done something to another child, they might want to apologize. It's always important to make sure that the victim or the child that's been offended or hurt is actually ready to receive that. And for two reasons. One, because the child who has done something to another child, when they realize that the other person's not ready, they may actually become more heightened, and actually it becomes a trigger because they haven't been able to process and regulate that. But also it's about protecting everybody in this situation. And so it's just a reminder that an apology isn't always necessary. One, if it's not actually heartfelt, and two, if it's going to trigger a negative emotion in either individual, sometimes let the restorative justice be just about the reflection for the one child, whilst making sure that the other child is protected, is safeguarded, and does have the security that we will try our very best to alleviate any of these issues. And that goes for staff members as well, recognizing that actually sometimes they might need separation from a child or from another teacher, but the ultimate goal is to make sure that everybody at the end of that understands where we've gone wrong and how we can actually build those bridges again. So
Yeah, thank you. It's really powerful to hear those real examples of what's happening in schools, and to bring that to light. And it's very clear from everybody who was speaking today that this is all really grounded in what's happening in your schools at the moment, and you're living and breathing it, and sharing some really great examples of how schools can effectively manage behaviour. Thank you so much for joining us and speaking today. And thank you to all of our live attendees as well. There's been some excellent conversation happening in the chat. From this, we will produce a document to kind of share as well, which will go through some of these key points. So please do look out for that, and we will kind of look through this chat as well, because there's some brilliant bits and pieces producers in here also. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. The certificate link is in the chat there. I will also email this out to everybody who attended live today. So if you don't manage to click that, it will drop into your inbox as well. But we would love some feedback on the event so that we can continue to do these, make them bigger and better. So thank you again. And so I will leave you now to exit when you're ready, but I will stay on here just for a little bit longer to leave that link up there.